Hey y'all, Enzo here with Knox Knife Mods, and tonight we're going to answer one simple question in our discussion here. Do wood handles suck? Let's dive into it, find out. I can't wait to hear from y'all on this, so let's get to it. All right, y'all, so kind of a clickbaity title, I know, but I did kind of get kicked off here with a gripe I have with one of my knives. We're going to get into that. So these 5 are the only wood-handled knives that I have in my collection. And it brought up the question to me, why don't I have more wood handles in my knife collection? And to me, the obvious answer is because there's just so many amazing handle materials we have in this modern context. We have titanium, we have G10, we have micarta, and I prefer all of those just way more than wood. Now, of course, wood is probably the oldest handle material that we've had for tools in general. Pocket knives, obviously, but swords had wood handles to begin with. Axes, I mean, just the list goes on. And I'm not here to just completely denigrate wood as a handle option. I'm sure that's actually kind of why I want to make this video. If there's anybody in the comments that has a lot of experience with woodworking, I'd love to hear your take on this. But my experiences with wood handles on pocket knives has largely been negative, but then I do have some really nice standout knives I'm going to show you in a minute that have wood handles. So the gripe that kicked this off was with my Civivi Nugs. This is an awesome knife. I really like it a lot. It's a design by Matthew Warewine of Ware Knives. I love all his designs. He's one of my favorite designers working right now. I just love his stuff. And this was his first budget-oriented offering from a production standpoint. This is an awesome, I think it's just a beautiful, attractive design. And it came in a bunch of handle options, one of those being Civivi's new Quiborsha wood. The other options were G10, micarta, and carbon fiber. Now, the reason I went with the Quiborsha wood was because visually it's very reminiscent of some of Matthew's custom handles. Now, he uses a lot of vintage micartas, butterscotch micartas, a lot of micarta that is very visually interesting to look at, really captures the eye. And honestly, I felt like the grain and the coloring of this Quiborsha wood kind of captured that essence. So I was pretty excited. And when I received the knife, I felt like, this looks pretty darn good for 56 bucks. I was really pleased with it. Now, what's happened since is really frustrating because I do not hard use this knife. This is actually, and it's not from not wanting to, I just haven't had this knife in the pocket on a situation where I need to hard use. But I probably wouldn't anyway because it's a liner lock knife. It's kind of a smallish handle. It's not made to be a hard use knife. It's made to be an EDC knife. So I haven't done anything more with it other than pocket carrying it and, just your typical deployments and cutting cardboard. I would say that'd be about it. Unfortunately, I have 2 large cracks that have just come out of nowhere. I don't know when this happened. I pulled this knife out the other day and I said, what in the world? There's 2 big old cracks on my wood handle here. So a little bit frustrating. Doesn't affect the functionality of the knife at all, which brings up another conversation of, does this even matter? And I'd love to get your take on that. It matters to me as a collector. Obviously I want my knives to be in as excellent shape as they can be, unless they're meant to just be total, knives made for abuse, which this, again, is not. But this also kind of calls to mind, so did this happen because of the placement of the screws rather than the integrity of the wood? I think that's a valid question. As you can see, the screws really kind of eat into the bevel here where the handle rolls toward the backspacer. So that could be an issue as well. But again, it's not something you would see on G10 or micarta, and certainly not titanium. Of course, this is a budget knife, so we wouldn't see it in titanium anyway, but you see my point. So that really kicked off this whole concept to me, and it also is leading me to another video that may or may not come out this week. I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to be modding this knife because I've just been so flustered with the handle, and I had a little bit of gift money from Christmas that I put toward another Nugs. But moving right along here, I have had some really positive experiences. We'll start off with the positive ones, and we'll kind of work our way down, if that sounds good. The most positive experiences I've had have actually been with my Primo knives. I have two Primos with wood handles. This is the Primo Spirit paring knife with Claro walnut handle. This handle has been fantastic, and I have used the tar out of this thing. This was my everyday carry fixed blade while I was working at Primo. I still use it a lot in the kitchen. I'm not working at Primo anymore, and I haven't had the opportunity to carry this as much, which is a shame because it is a wonderful little companion knife. I love this thing for everyday carry. This walnut has held up unbelievably well. There's just no weakness at all. It feels very robust in hand. Yeah, I've been very pleased with it. And in addition to that, we'll just put that up here for now. I also have this Primo Santoku with a bog oak handle. This one, I care for it a little bit more. I tend to oil it a lot just to try to keep it pristine. But this has also held up very well. So in the case of these two knives, obviously having worked there, I'm very familiar with John's stabilization process for wood handles at Primo. Now, wood's probably the material he uses the most, and I know how much effort and thoughtfulness go into the process of stabilizing his wood handles. So, for example, if I was buying from Primo, I wouldn't think twice about getting a wood handle. It wouldn't even be a concern to me, and I would know that I wouldn't have to worry about it. Now, when you're talking about Primo, they're basically a custom company, or semi-custom maybe, but I mean, it's a high level of hand finishing that goes into each knife. Now, when you're talking about something that's more on a production level, that's where things get different. So we'll keep it positive for right now. My old hickory slip joint. Now, I've heavily modified this. It doesn't look anything like when I bought it, but it's your classic old hickory knife, except it's a slip joint, and it had that old hickory wood handle that said Old Hickory right across the handle. And while there was nothing functionally wrong with it, I found that to be pretty ugly, so I decided to modify it. I basically put a texture against the wood here, kind of burned in some sections, got rid of the old hickory font, and I rounded the edges because the edges were like square. It felt like you were holding a brick. I rounded the edges off nicely, so it's very comfortable in hand now. Nice full grip on this thing. And then lastly, I dyed the wood kind of a burgundy with a little bit of yellow, and I was a little bit worried during this process because I was afraid of how the dye would affect the stability of the wood, but it's held up wonderfully. Once it was done drying from the dye, I also applied some thin set glue and to kind of do a little bit of sealing, which seems to have worked pretty well, to be honest with you. So this thing's held up wonderfully. From the factory, there are no gaps in it against the liners. There's no pulling away. It's just held up extraordinarily well. I'm not going to get into a full review of this thing. I'm sure y'all have heard me talk about it before, but this one's been a great example of a wood-handled knife. Now, my next one here, this is the Rough Rider Reserve Black Saddle Horn. This is using a wood that, actually, before we continue, if you're wondering what type of wood this is on the old hickory, I don't know. If you were to reach out to old hickory and ask them, they would say hardwood. So not very specific. I've seen different comments. Apparently they used to be actually made of hickory. Now there's a rumor they're made of some kind of oak, but nobody really knows. Again, though, everybody that I've read on online forums that own these knives, whether they're the kitchen old hickory or the slip joint, mostly have positive things to say. So that's the type of wood it uses. We don't really know. It's some sort of hardwood. That's all we know. Now, on to the Rough Rider here. This one is using a wood that I'm sure you've heard of if you've been in the knife community for a while. It's using Paca wood. The Spyderco Delica had many variations using Paca wood. It's a wood that is made and stabilized to be a great production option for a wood-handled knife. This one has a checkering texture applied to it. And overall, I've been pretty pleased with this one. Now, that's to say it's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. There is some, let's see if I can show y'all, there is some areas where it's pulling away slightly, as you can see here at the bolster. Nothing terrible, though, at all. And let's see, yes, there's a pretty large gap right here. And I don't know, again, these are the things, would that be happening? I've seen this happen on bone-handled knives as well. But there's just something about wood that I just don't quite feel like it's as robust, even as a bone-handled slip joint. I would rather have bone than wood. But this one overall has been just fine. I don't know if this blue paint here, I think it's just that. I think it's just a section that has been painted. I don't think it's G10 or anything like that, but if you do know, feel free to correct me in the comments. But visually, I think this looks great. I do like the basket weave texture on it. I think that looks really nice. And overall, yeah, been pleased with this one as well. Now, here's where, aside from the Civivi Nugs, I have a little bit of, I have some thoughts on, it kind of reminds me why I'm not crazy about wood. This is it's a beautiful handle. Look at that handle. This is a semi-custom, but it's one of these things where it's not really a semi-custom. It's basically a kit-made knife. And it was a really wonderful gift from my dad. He got it from a store in Hawaii where they had a local guy who made knives, but I'm sure you've seen this pattern before. Like, this is kind of a ready-made kind of knife thing. But he made his own covers, though. He made these beautiful, admittedly, absolutely beautiful koa wood handle covers. Koa is just a lovely wood to see it move in the light. Obviously very prominent on guitars. But this one is, and again, is this the wood's fault or is it the maker's fault? That's really the question I have here. As you can see, it's pulling away in some spots. It doesn't line up with the bolsters well, which that's definitely the maker's fault. But it just, like here, you can see it start to pull away from the liner there. Toward the back end, it's a little bit better. But yeah, it just, all the gaps and everything, again, that could certainly be the maker, but it just does not instill confidence for me. That one, I can't remember the name of this knife company. They're not really around anymore, but yeah, super attractive handle, but unfortunately, in its execution, it just kind of stumbles before the finish line there. Lastly, this is one that I really think y'all can help me with. So this isn't a Buck 110, obviously. This is a Buck 110 ripoff, but probably the most successful knife in the world, the most storied knife in the world, the Buck 110. It's a wood-handled knife. Now, granted, it has brass bolsters with, I guess you would call them wood onlays. Typically, they're ebony, which is a very robust wood, as I understand it. If you're a carpenter, please correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. But I've heard nothing but positivity about the Buck 110. And it's an incredibly well. Now this knife here, this specific knife, as I said, is a Buck 110 ripoff. This is just some sort of Pakistani thing that somebody got from my dad. His initials are still very faintly on there. But yeah, that brings up a point of, you know, the most important, arguably one of the most important knives in the world has always had wood handles. And it's been different types of wood. I know it's been ebony, but they've also used different types of wood in the past. And I've never heard any complaints of a Buck 110's handle falling apart. So I guess at the end of the day, the answer to this question is pretty self-evident. It comes down to the execution and the implementation and the maker or the company, whatever level they're working at. Now that said, I will still, going forward, I will always take G10, micarta, or titanium over wood. To me, I just don't feel like I can totally just put a knife in my pocket or say I get in a situation where I needed to actually do some hard use and I didn't have a choice and I needed to use that knife. If it was a wood-handled knife, I would be a little concerned. However, with something like titanium or G10, certainly with G10, I wouldn't have to worry at all. I know the handle would hold up just fine. But a little bit of a rambly video here. Thank you guys for coming along with me on this one. Please because again, like I said, I did this partially because I think there's going to be a lot of people that know more than me on this. If you do, throw it down in the comments. Tell me why I'm totally wrong, totally off base. Why wood is a great handle option. Obviously, it tends to be a very formal look, which in the right setting is perfect. So that's certainly something worth considering there. But all that said, what's the word I'm looking for? It's giving me the opportunity to make a video on modifying this knife, which is going to be my next video, maybe this week, maybe next week, we'll see, maybe next Monday, but it's going to be on this bad boy and another Nugs. So thank you guys for joining in. Looking forward to hearing what y'all can educate me on, or educate our fellow viewers or whatever. And we will see you guys in the next one. Peace.